We're almost there, fellas. Football is almost back. We're a couple days away from every team being reported to NFL training camp. I believe most teams will be done by the 23rd or the 24th of July. So today, what I'm going to go through is basically every NFL team, their training camp battles, things I'm going to be intrigued by as we get through the summer and into preseason games. This should be kind of just a quick off-the-cuff refresher of what we're exactly looking for in terms of the news items that we want to be following. So if you enjoyed any point, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe. Now let's get into it. All right, so quick reminder before we get into every NFL team and kind of their training camp storylines and battles. I do fantasy news of the day TikToks over on our TikTok page. That is linked down below in the description. And also in our draft guide, I'm going to be doing a new feature this year where I basically aggregate all of the news that came out from training camp and the preseason and buzz and all that kind of stuff so that we can properly track and find guys like this year's Puka Nacua or this year's, insert X player that has a lot of buzz in training camp that breaks out for fantasy. So draft guide, of course, is available down below in the description by signing up on Underdog, and then also follow the TikTok for all the fantasy news of the day stuff that I end up doing. So with training camp, the things that we want to be paying attention to are these. Number one, we want to be tracking injuries. Any new injuries that come up, players that are already injured, guys like Nick Chubb, TJ Hawkinson, guys like that, already injured players that we want to be tracking. We also want to pay attention for like disciplinary stuff. Usually comes out around this time. So Jordan Addison, Rashee Rice, guys like that could see some discipline from the league. And then also we want to be hearing a lot of positive stuff about young players or unknown players and rookies. And that's how you got to Puka Nacua last year, where there was a lot of training camp buzz coming out about Puka Nacua. So if we hear that Troy Franklin every day is tearing up Denver Broncos training camp, then that's something we want to be paying attention to. And then also, too, we want to be paying attention to like usage-related stuff. So if a coach says that this guy's going to be our third down back, or this guy's going to be our starter, or this guy's going to be this guy's going to be on the field as our starting X wide receiver, he's going to be our slot receiver, whatever we hear related to usage, and of course we get that confirmed come time for the preseason games, that is also something worth paying attention to. So we're going to go through every team. I'm going to go NFC to AFC and just break down basically what I'm looking for in training camp. It could be an injury-related thing. It could be a battle. It could be something totally different regardless. We're going to start with, in my opinion, if I had to rank these, the number one training camp storyline in all of the NFL, to me, is the Packers wide receiver core. So we're going to start in the NFC North with the Green Bay Packers. We have no ungodly idea what's going to happen here. We are all drafting these players, especially on Underdog. Jordan Love is obviously a great pick. Josh Jacobs, we know what his role is going to be. But with Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks, nobody has any idea what the order will be, who's going to be on the field the most, who's going to be running the most routes, who's going to be the number one, who's going to be in the slot, who's going to be on the outside. I feel like everybody's kind of projecting and predicting that it's going to be Jaden Reed on the field the most. It's going to be Christian Watson on the field the second most, and you guys can see the ADPs beside me. And then Romeo Doubs on field the third most, but Dontavian Wicks maybe some upside that he takes over late in the season for Romeo Doubs. So basically the three wide receiver set would be like Christian Watson at X, Romeo Doubs on the other side, and two wide receiver sets, Jaden Reed in the slot, getting design touches, getting a lot of targets and that kind of thing. And then Dontavian Wicks being efficient on the touches that he does get. So again, if we get any clarity at all with this wide receiver core, that would be very, very helpful. If they come out and say that, Jaden Reed's going to be playing only from the slot, that's going to give us a good insight that maybe these outside wide receivers, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, are a little bit undervalued. We also have some intrigue at the tight end position with this team as well, because Luke Musgrave right now is the only one that's healthy. Tucker Kraft dealt with a pec injury in OTAs, I believe. He's starting camp on PUP, and he's probably going to be out for the next week, maybe 2 weeks of training camp. But Tucker Kraft, to me, is the better tight end. So if he gets back on the field and he wins out the job, maybe he is the guy that we want to be paying attention to. But as of now, Luke Musgrave is going to be kind of running unopposed as the starting tight end for this team. But once they're back on the field together, that will be an interesting storyline to follow as well. And even the backfield too. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd getting talked up as a potential contributor in that backfield and in that team. Not really a whole lot of certainty with the Packers outside of the fact that Jordan Love is the starting quarterback and Josh Jacobs is the starting running back, at least at this point in time. So they're a very intriguing team to watch. Hopefully we get some good coverage, some good preseason usage out of those guys. Next, we get to the Detroit Lions. They're a pretty straightforward operation. I think we know most of the roles. Amon-Ra's the one. Jameson Williams, they project to be the number 2 wide receiver. And then they have Sam Laporte at tight end. And we kind of know the backfield roles at this point in time. David Montgomery is your short, in between the tackles grinder. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be your efficient pass catching. Hopefully gets the high value touches. But again, any insight we get about the backfield that's maybe Jahmyr Gibbs is taking a step forward, he's going to get more work this year, that would be the only real source of intrigue for me, because I feel like the rest of Detroit Lions training camp is just going to be Jameson Williams hype pieces, and I don't really know what to think of that, because I don't believe JMO is that talented of a player, but we'll have to see what happens there in Detroit. Moving to the Chicago Bears, I don't think there's much intrigue here either, because we know Caleb Williams is going to start week 1. They've already come out and announced that, so we don't have a quarterback battle to worry about. I think the backfield should be pretty straightforward. Maybe some people are intrigued by it, but I think DeAndre Swift will probably be like a 60-65% opportunity share guy, and then Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson will kind of mix in. Maybe Khalil Herbert gets traded, or maybe he gets cut or something like that, and that would result in Roschon or whoever the backup is having a better role. But for the most part, I think the backfield's pretty straightforward. For me, if I had to pick one training camp storyline for Chicago that I'd be interested in, it's how does the 3 wide receiver set look? Is it DJ Moore and Rome Odunze on the outside, or is it DJ Moore and Keenan Allen on the outside? Because I think it would make sense if it was Odunze on the outside, because Keenan's old. He's kind of lost a step to some degree. He makes more sense as a full-time slot. And I also just want to hear positive Rome Odunze stuff, because I know what a prospect he was. I mean, he was a wide receiver 1 upside prospect from a dynasty perspective in the FSC prospect model. Those type of guys usually get out to hot starts. And even though he has a lot of target competition, guys that have been established dudes in the NFL, he's coming in with the quarterback, right? Caleb Williams and him are in the same draft class. They've been training together. It's possible that he does actually establish himself early on as his favorite target, despite the fact that there's like veteran guys. It's not the same really as the JSN situation where Geno Smith and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett already had a rapport together. It's that Caleb's coming in, he's brand new to everybody, and he was working with Rome Odunze before any of them, because they were working together in the pre-draft process. So that is going to be an interesting thing for me. I've been drafting a lot of Rome Odunze. Minnesota Vikings, a lot of stuff to talk about here. I mean, Jordan Addison could get suspended, so we got to pay attention to that. Maybe it's something that comes later on, but we will probably get some news regarding a suspension at some point during training camp for him. The quarterback battle, I think, is the most intriguing part of this, because Sam Darnold is the guy that they brought in to potentially be the starter so that they could bring J.J. McCarthy along slow. But if J.J. McCarthy outplays him all of training camp, I don't think they're going to have a choice but to start J.J. McCarthy. And I would say if J.J. is the week 1 starter, I would feel very, very good about taking Justin Jefferson in drafts, because I think Sam Darnold is the type of quarterback who in training camp looks really good, because there's no pressure, there's no defense, there's no, it's just show off your arm talent, show off your command of the offense, and that's always been a strength of Sam Darnold. So if J.J. McCarthy is outplaying him, that would be a very, very positive sign that J.J. McCarthy is a great late-round quarterback to go after, and also that Justin Jefferson and the other surrounding Vikings players are in for maybe a better season than we're thinking. We're kind of all assuming this is going to be like a quick rebuild on the fly. Maybe at the end of the season they put it all together, but I would feel pretty comfortable with the Minnesota Vikings if J.J. McCarthy wins out that job in training camp. Then we also have the backfield. I mean, Aaron Jones will probably be the starter. Ty Chandler probably the backup, but we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens there. And then, of course, TJ Hawkinson is coming off of an ACL tear, and we want to know what his health status is. He tore his ACL late in the season in December. So we want to see, is he starting the season on PUP, or is he just on PUP in training camp? Is he actually out there doing drills? Whatever the case is with TJ Hawkinson, I expect him to start the season on PUP, but I'm not exactly sure if that's going to happen 100%. So that is going to be a situation to monitor as well. Moving into the NFC East, we have the Dallas Cowboys, the Philadelphia Eagles, all the teams in here. The Cowboys, is anyone else good on this offense? That's really my biggest question, because I'm worried a little bit about the Cowboys offense. I think everybody's penciling them in, top 5 offense. They always are. But Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion, are the only plus starters on their offense. And they're great, probably elite players. But the run game is suspect. The tight end position, we like Ferguson, but we're kind of just projecting him on a basis of volume. He didn't really prove that he's like a difference-making talent. And then Brandon Cooks looked noticeably washed last year. Jalen Tolbert has been nothing throughout this point in his career. If I were Dallas, I would be on the phone with Denver calling about Cortland Sutton or something, because I don't think they have a lot around Lamb and Prescott to be able to really make a deep run on offense, because if you can take away Lamb, which maybe teams after last season maybe figure out a way to do that a little bit more because they have some tape on it, I would be worried about the rest of this Cowboys offense. So for me, I want to hear good news about Brandon Cooks or good news about Jalen Tolbert or good news about Jake Ferguson, because I don't think this offense is well suited for today's NFL. Back in the 90s, you could have one dude and give him the ball every single time as long as you had a decent running game. But nowadays, people need multiple weapons on the outside because defenses and cornerbacks are too good to just, let CeeDee Lamb beat them every single game. Like, I just don't think that's going to be a recipe for success. And then also in this backfield, Zeke or Dowdle, right? We're talking about Zeke and Dowdle as these guys that are potentially big values in drafts right now, because if the Cowboys offense is really good, then somebody's going to be punching in the touchdowns. To me, it will be Ezekiel Elliott getting the majority of the carries, Rico Dowdle playing the pseudo Tony Pollard from 2022 role, and that's kind of how things will go. But the question is, which one do you draft right now? And my answer is both. I think both of them are cheap enough that I'm taking my shares at both guys. But Zeke is the one that I lean towards, because if this offense is good, like most people project it to be, he will be the one who punches in the touchdowns, and that's why I'm after Ezekiel Elliott right now. So the backfield, definitely something of intrigue. Do they add to it? Is it just these two guys going into the season? That would also factor in as well. So Philadelphia Eagles, I pretty much know what to expect here. I don't think there's much intrigue with this team. What I'm actually interested in hearing is the tendencies of the offense. Are they going to throw more? Are they going to be more up-tempo? They've been a decent pace of play team the past couple of years, but they haven't really been pass-heavy. So if Kellen Moore, and we know everywhere he's been pass-heavy, wants to bring that approach to the Philadelphia Eagles, I feel really good about Jalen Hurts. He's my quarterback 1 in fantasy this year. Feel really good about A.J. Brown. He's a top 10 player in fantasy for me this year. Devontae Smith, a top 30 player for me in fantasy. And I've been drafting a lot of Saquon as well, because if this offense is up-tempo, is throwing the ball, he's going to have opportunities to punch in touchdowns and catch passes as well. So for me, I feel pretty good about this offense in general. I don't think there's a whole lot of intrigue around their training camp. Maybe RB2, if you're interested in Will Shipley as Saquon's handcuff, would be interesting to you. But for the most part, I just kind of know the roles of all the players involved. The Washington Commanders, Daniels is the biggest storyline. How does he look? Is he the starter right away? I think he will be. But definitely Jaden Daniels, his effect on the offense in the preseason and in training camp is going to be the biggest storyline here, especially when you add a top 2 pick in the draft. The wide receiver core seems pretty straightforward. I think it's going to be Terry. I think it's going to be Dotson. And I think Luke McCaffrey will probably step in and play the slot right away. And then the tight end position also interests me a little bit, because is Zach Ertz going to Zach Ertz, where he keeps a young, talented tight end off the field just like he did in Arizona? Or does Ben Sinnott come out and actually provide a value as the starting tight end for this team? Because the thing I worry about Ben Sinnott is that he's not quite ready to play right away. So I think that it's possible that Zach Ertz is going to be the starter from day one in the NFL season. And then he's going to come along a little bit slower. Maybe next year is the year that we're all in on Ben Sinnott. But he's the type of guy that I think could win people leagues potentially if he is ready to play right away and is going to be the starter right away. Because like I said, with Caleb Williams and Odunze, Sinnott and Jaden Daniels are coming in together. It's very good for their chemistry that they work together in rookie minicamp and all that kind of stuff. So New York Giants closing out this division. I just want to hear an ungodly glaze fest for Malik Neighbors, because I think he should be the talk of training camp. He should be roasting every DB, making everybody look stupid. If that's not the case, I'm going to be a little bit worried about how exposed I am to Malik Neighbors, because I already have a lot of shares. 19% of my underdog drafts, I've taken Malik Neighbors, and he's like a 2-3 turn pick on underdog. In home leagues, he'll go a little bit later than that, but I do really want to hear a lot of positive buzz for Malik Neighbors. I think that's number one thing that I need to see from the Giants. Also, I want to see how the rest of the wide receiver core shakes out. To me, I think it's going to be Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, but is Darius Slayton factoring in? Anybody else factoring in? That kind of thing. And then also, Daniel Jones' health is something that we need to know about, because if he's not healthy, then Drew Lock's going to be the starter for the beginning of the season, and that's going to worry me a little bit on everybody involved, especially Malik Neighbors. And then I'm assuming this is Devin Singletary's backfield, at least to start the year, but does Tyrone Tracy get a lot of training camp buzz? Is he factoring in to the rotation early on in the season, or is he just a contingent upside play who maybe pushes Devin Singletary down the stretch? Right now, I think that's probably how it's going to go, but maybe Tyrone Tracy is more pro-ready than I'm giving him credit for. Next, we move on to the NFC South. We go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my favorite team. pretty simple training camp battles for fantasy here. We know Godwin and Evans are the number 2 and number 1 receivers, respectively. We know Baker Mayfield's going to start at quarterback. We know K. Otton's going to start at tight end. Rashad White versus Bucky Irving. I tend to be on the Rashad White side of things. I think he's going to win out the job just like he did last year and be a majority touch holder. But if Bucky Irving's tearing up training camp and looks great in preseason games, maybe he eats into Rashad White's carry workload a little bit more. And then also Jalen McMillan versus Trey Palmer for the number 3 wide receiver position. Probably not somebody we're overly interested in season-long drafts, but in best ball, I am very interested in the number 3 wide receiver for this team. I believe it will be Jalen McMillan. I think that Godwin and Evans will be the number 1 and 2 on the outside in 2 wide receiver sets. And then when they go into 3 wide receiver sets, they'll rotate Jalen McMillan and Chris Godwin in and out of the slot because that's how I think they would be best utilized. But it's possible because Trey Palmer's more of an outside wide receiver, he wins out that job over McMillan, who's also a rookie. But everything I've heard about McMillan as a Bucs fan so far is they absolutely love this guy. He's a true professional. He's going to come in right away and be a huge starter. When I break down in the draft guide all the news blurbs that happened in the Buccaneers team, I guarantee Jalen McMillan will be responsible for a lot of them because he has gotten a lot of buzz so far. The Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins' health is the only thing that I care about right now because I know what the roles are of everybody else. Bijan's the starting running back. Algiers is handcuffed. Drake London's the number 1 receiver. Kyle Pitts is destined to get puff pieces about how he's going to be used and how he looks amazing this year and how he looks healthy this year. So I'm expecting all of that stuff. Darnell Mooney, number 2 wide receiver, expecting all of that stuff. What I'm not expecting or what I need to know is Kirk Cousins healthy? If not, is Michael Penix going to take the starting reps? Like, the quarterback position is definitely the intrigue with the Atlanta Falcons, as are kind of the schematic changes. Are they going to throw more? Are they going to use more motion? How is the offense going to look? Is also something I'm intrigued to see in the preseason as well as hear about during training camp. The New Orleans Saints, the big news there is Alvin Kamara. What's his holdout, new contract situation look like? Does Kendre Miller get a lot of work with the ones because Kamara isn't there? Does Jamal Williams look half decent? Is he going to factor into this backfield? That is the big intrigue with New Orleans, is what does the Saints backfield look like? Because I feel pretty confident that Carr's going to start at quarterback. Olave is going to be his number 1. Rashid Shaheed's going to be his field stretching number 2. Juwan Johnson's health, I guess, is a little bit of an issue at tight end, but they're going to use Taysom Hill a lot as well. So to me, the big concern here is how does Kendre look as the RB2 and how does Alvin Kamara show up even as the RB1 if he's looking for a new contract and that type of thing. So moving to the Carolina Panthers, we also have Xavier Legette and Jonathan Brooks, both rookies that I'm very intrigued to see what happens. Xavier Legette, I think he was a little bit raw, but if he comes out and he looks great and he's like a starting receiver right away, I would feel very, very confident drafting him because outside of Deontay Johnson, there's nobody really there that has a proven track record of commanding targets with Adam Thielen being as old as he is. So Xavier Legette would be one guy that I'm very intrigued by with the Carolina Panthers. And then Jonathan Brooks' health is the other thing because he was placed on PUP already coming into training camp, meaning he's going to be out for another couple weeks. He tore his ACL, I don't know, about 9-10 months ago. So he's right up against it as far as timelines are concerned for him to start at running back. And I think as of right now, I kind of expect Jonathan Brooks to get out to a slow start, similar to how we saw maybe Breece Hall use last year at the beginning of the season, and that's going to result in some immediate value for like a Chuba Hubbard and also Jonathan Brooks losing a little bit of ADP value because we can get him a little bit later, but in home leagues where you can afford to stash him and then in best ball where all the prize pool money is at the top, he's an intriguing pick nonetheless. So let's head to the NFC West here. We have the 49ers with Brandon Ayuk's holdout. That's pretty much all I care about. We know the rest of the roles of this offense. So what does Brandon Ayuk do? Does he come to camp? Does he get a new contract? Is he requesting a trade, which we've already heard all of this stuff right now? Brandon Ayuk is where my eyes are on the 49ers because he is a top 15 player for me in redraft right now. And I'm legitimately concerned that he won't report to training camp. Legitimately concerned that he will hold out until the 49ers trade him. Doesn't make any sense for them to do that because they're trying to win a championship. He knows that. He probably wants to stay there. They just need to get the numbers a little bit closer. I tend to think that Ayuk will just get extended. He'll hold out long enough that the 49ers will budge a little bit and they'll actually extend him. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe they do end up trading him or maybe he does hold out. I wouldn't imagine it goes into the season, but it might make his ADP a little bit murky in fantasy drafts. So Los Angeles Rams, I know the pass-catching core, it's going to be Puka, it's going to be Kupp, it's going to be Stafford throwing them the ball. Tight end, I'm not really overly interested in. Colby Parkinson's probably going to start given his contract, but not really intrigued by that. the backfield is the real competition here, because Kyren Williams was one of the biggest league winners in all of fantasy last year, probably the biggest outside of his teammate Puka Nacua. Is he healthy? Because he was dealing with an ankle injury in OTAs. Blake Corum was tearing it up in OTAs. Is he going to continue to do that? Because if that happens, I'm not going to draft Kyren at all until like round 4, round 5, because he right now is being projected as if he's going to do something close to what he did last year. And I'm concerned that he won't, because number one, he's not healthy. And number two, Blake Corum was added, who is a very capable early down back who can spell him on the goal line, who can take away a lot of those early round touches and early down touches that he was really, really making famous for last year, because Kyren was a workhorse. Like 90% of the snaps, led the NFL in opportunity share. If his workload is in jeopardy, that is going to be a major issue. So Blake Corum and Kyren Williams is what I'm most intrigued by in Los Angeles. Arizona Cardinals, just like Malik Neighbors, I need to hear Marvin Harrison's tearing it up, because if Marvin Harrison isn't tearing it up, then I don't think that his ADP is justified. I love Marvin Harrison. I have him as a first-round player. He's my 12th overall player. I'm not going to double count it if he's getting a lot of praise, because he should. He was a first-round pick, top 5 pick, and if he's not getting the praise, I'm going to be more concerned than if he is getting the praise, if that makes any sense. So for me with Marvin Harrison, I need to hear him tearing it up. I need to hear him making every cornerback look stupid. Otherwise, I'm going to move him down. But if he does get that praise, I'm not moving him anywhere, because I'm already really, really high on Marvin, assuming all of that stuff would come. So that's where I'm at with the wide receiver core, and I think Michael Wilson's very clearly the number 2 receiver there. The next biggest battle at Arizona there is the running back position. What we've heard so far is that steadfast, it's James Conner's job. He's the starting running back. That's what we've heard back in OTAs from the coaching staff. Coach Speak Index on Twitter has talked about this as well, where it's been James Conner drumbeat. He's the number 1 guy. Trey Benson is coming in. Is he next back in the rotation, just a contingent play if James Conner gets injured, which is a decent bet because he's an older running back? Or does Trey Benson start making this backfield sound like a committee? Or does he start getting buzz that he might even be the starter? I'm expecting James Conner to go into the season as the starting running back and Benson to be maybe a contingent late season play, but who knows? Maybe he comes into the season, he looks great, and he actually beats the job out from James Conner and makes it a committee right away. That would obviously be really good news for Trey Benson's upside. Seattle Seahawks, we've heard the Jackson Smith and Jigba drumbeat so far. It's got to continue, because I feel great about JSN in the new Ryan Grubb scheme. They're going to be more pass heavy. They're going to use JSN more downfield, which is how he was used to a high degree at Ohio State his final year in college. Is it business as usual for the wide receiver core, where we know it's Metcalf, we know it's Tyler Lockett, and then it's JSN? Or does Tyler Lockett take a backseat to JSN? Because I think he should. I think Tyler Lockett took a step back last year as a player, and if JSN can really win out that job, that would be awesome for him, especially if he was on the field in 2 wide receiver sets and not just a slot receiver like he was last year. And then also, is it business as usual at running back? Is it Kenneth Walker's the guy, Zach Charbonnet's the backup, or is it 50-50, or maybe Charbonnet even beats him out? Backfield competition there in Seattle is going to be interesting to follow. And same with the tight end position. Right now, Noah Fant is the only guy on the roster from last year. They let go of Colby Parkinson. They let go of Will Dissly. Is Noah Fant going to be a starting alpha tight end in this new scheme where Mike McDonald just came from Baltimore, where, of course, they used Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely really well? Noah Fant could be a huge, huge breakout this year if he's the starting tight end, routes-wise, snap share-wise. That's going to be something, A, to follow that they're saying, and B, to see during training camp and during preseason games. If he's on the field with the number 1 team for a lot of that, he is going to be one of my favorite late-round targets at the tight end position, because he's athletic. We know he was a great prospect coming out. It's just taken him a while to develop, and that sounds a lot like David Njoku. And David Njoku the last 2 years has really returned on his ADP where he's been going. So flipping over to the AFC side of things, and I'll try and speed this up. I think the NFC had more training camp battles to talk about. Ravens, there's not really any battles to report of. I would say that everybody's pretty much solidified in their roles outside of Rashad Bateman, who's currently the team's wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers. So rookie Tez Walker, 4th-round pick, maybe he pushes him for that job. That would be the only real training camp battle I could see in Baltimore. Going to the Cincinnati Bengals, we have the backfield as the major battle that we're looking at, because I expect the narrative to be similar to the Cardinals backfield. I expect the narrative to be Zach Moss is our starter. That's what I expect the narrative to be in Cincinnati. They paid Zach Moss. That's what they wanted to do in free agency. But to me, I've heard this story before, and I tweeted this out the other day, but you have a guy like Zach Moss, who was a fringe NFL backup starter talent. He had career best marks in fantasy last year. He was like a RB3 in fantasy on the Indianapolis Colts, but he was elevated by that Shane Steichen offensive scheme that has elevated running backs in the past, Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift, guys like that. And he signs a new deal in free agency. He's expected to have this big volume workload in Cincinnati. But I think that the backup is more talented than him. So that's why I'm drafting a lot of Chase Brown. I think Chase Brown is the better running back. Last year, he was 12th in fantasy points per opportunity as a rookie. Zach Moss was in his 4th NFL season, and he was 37th in fantasy points per opportunity as a very, very elevated scheme behind a better offensive line. Should have carried him to be better than that. So for me, I think Zach Moss is being overdrafted, Chase Brown underdrafted, but I don't think either of them are overly expensive. So whatever guy you like, I think is going to be interesting. I also think wide receiver 3 could be a battle here. Behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, we could see Jermaine Burton or Andre Yoshivash be the number 3 receiver there, but the marquee matchup is definitely the backfield in Cincinnati. So moving on to the Cleveland Browns, the health of this team is the thing that I'm most concerned about, because when healthy, Watson's going to be the quarterback, and Njoku's going to be the tight end. Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper, those are going to be the top 2 receivers, as well as Nick Chubb, the top running back. But Deshaun Watson isn't healthy right now. He's kind of coming back from that shoulder injury that ended his season last year. What does his health look like? And Nick Chubb isn't healthy right now. He blew his ACL in week 2 of the season last year. We saw a video of him last week squatting like 585 pounds. That's great news, but he's still only 8 months removed from ACL reconstructive surgery. So if he starts the season on the PUP list, misses the first 6 games, what does Jerome Ford's ADP look like once that gets announced that he's going to be on the PUP list? What does Deontay Foreman look like in this backfield along with Jerome Ford? So Nick Chubb's health specifically is the one I'm most intrigued with, but also Deshaun Watson's health as well. Next, we go to the Steelers, the quarterback battle, if you want to call it that. I think it's going to be Russell Wilson. I don't even think it's really a battle right now based on everything they've said, but some people want to convince themselves that Justin Fields can still win this thing. So I guess it is a quarterback battle to follow. And then anything running back related that we didn't already know is intriguing to me because, I mean, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, we kind of know how they like to use these guys. Najee's your bruiser. He's your, early down in the red zone kind of guy. And then Jalen Warren's your change of pace back. But the workload is like 55% Najee, 45% Warren. But as we all know, anybody with eyes knows that Warren's probably the better running back. Does that change? Do they shift more towards Warren, or is it going to be business as usual? We kind of know Arthur Smith is going to love to run the ball and love to use these 2 running backs. They beefed up their offensive line. They got a quarterback in Russell Wilson who's good at operating an offense that runs the ball a lot. So to me, it's very clear that that's what their goal is this season. Play good defense, run the football, be efficient, don't turn the football over. And George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth are really the only pass-catching weapons I care about. I don't even really care who wide receiver 2 is, whether it's Van Jefferson or Quez Watkins or Roman Wilson, who they drafted. I don't think they're going to be overly useful for fantasy. I think it's going to be Pickens, Freiermuth, and the running backs that we care about from this team. Moving to the AFC East, we have the Buffalo Bills. I think the only really intriguing storyline is the wide receiver position. I think James Cook is going to be the starting running back with Ray Davis maybe working in. I think Dalton Kincaid's the starting tight end, obviously. And then what happens at wide receiver? Is Keon Coleman ready to start right away? Is Khalil Shakir taking the next step? Is Curtis Samuel at home in this offense? He's played with Joe Brady before. He had his career best season with Joe Brady back a couple years ago with the Carolina Panthers when he was the OC there. So what does the wide receiver position look like? What does the rotation look like? What do the snap shares look like? Who is playing where? Is Coleman at X? Is Coleman in the slot? They're all slot receivers too. Coleman should play in the slot. Curtis Samuel should play in the slot, and Khalil Shakir should play in the slot. So where is everybody going would be a big-time question mark for me, and I think it's a question mark for everybody. Right now, I've been taking the most of Khalil Shakir because he's the cheapest of these 3 wide receivers, but I would like to hear some optimism on the other 2 guys. Miami Dolphins, the backfield split is the thing that I'm most intrigued by because, of course, Devon Achane is the most expensive Miami Dolphins running back right now, but is the discrepancy between his ADP and Raheem Mostert's ADP where they're actually going to finish? Like, you got RB11 versus RB25. Are they going to be like RB8 and RB17 in points per game once we get to the actual season? So the backfield split with Achane, with Mostert, with rookie Jalen Wright, what does that look like? How are they going to distribute the touches? Is Achane getting more work? Is Mostert getting less work? Is Wright going to factor in more than RB3 factored into this backfield last year? And then also, I mean, kind of a weird storyline, but Tyreek Hill and Waddle are the top 2 receivers here. I think they have a better wide receiver 3 this year than they did in years past. I mean, they had Cedric Wilson and a bunch of bums before. I think OBJ and Malik Washington, the rookie from Virginia, are both decent enough players that they could actually carve out a half-decent wide receiver 3 role. And in best ball, that's where I'm taking my shots. I'm not going to take those guys in managed leagues, but in best ball, Odell Beckham and Malik Washington do interest me as like 18th round dart throws. Moving on to the Jets. Again, we know pretty much that Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are the guys that we care most about in this offense, but who's Breece Hall's backup? Who's his handcuff? Right now, it looks to be Braylon Allen, but does Isaiah Davis work in? Does Israel Abanikanda work in? I personally think Isaiah Davis is the best running back in that backfield behind Breece Hall, but Braylon Allen had Big Ten experience. He's probably a little bit more developed at this point in time because Isaiah Davis was coming from South Dakota State, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And then wide receiver 2. I mean, Mike Williams is coming off of an ACL tear. He was placed on PUP already. Is Malachi Corley ready to start? Is he going to be a guy that plays on the outside? Is he strictly a slot receiver? I think it would be great if Garrett Wilson was the starting like Z. They move him around the formation. They put Mike Williams at X, draw all the number 1 corners, let him run, downfield and get a 16% target share, make the odd big play. But he's basically, his job is to free up Garrett Wilson. And then they move Malachi Corley all over the formation and give him the ball on design touches, throw him into the slot on most of their routes as well. He's an interesting player. I think Corley is one guy that I'm interested in best ball, but I'm not sure how well he's going to start the season. Coming from Western Kentucky, he seems like he could take a little bit of time to develop. Next, we go to the New England Patriots, and there is a lot of training camp intrigue here because I don't know any position starter outside of tight end. Hunter Henry's going to be the starting tight end there, but the quarterback position is number 1. We've heard reports now that Drake May would really, really have to kick the shit out of Jacoby Brissett for this starting job. So I would say right now it looks to be Drake May is not the starter. It's going to be Jacoby Brissett to start the season, but we'll have to wait and see how that develops. The running back rotation, I feel pretty confident it's Ramondre Stevenson's job, and Antonio Gibson will mix in on third downs. But how much does that impact Ramondre Stevenson's bottom line? Because he was a really good receiver 2 years ago when he was a breakout running back, top 10 guy in 2022. If Gibson's going to be taking away that receiving work, how does that affect him? And then the most intriguing storyline here is, what does the wide receiver rotation look like? For me, I think it's going to be Jalen Polk, Demario Douglas, and then one of Kendrick Bourne and Javon Baker on the other side when they go to 3 wide receiver sets. But right now, Polk and Douglas are the 2 that I feel best about, and they're the ones I've been drafting the most of, but I have been drafting a lot of Javon Baker as well because he has the body style, the size to play X wide receiver or to play on the outside, which is what I think they could really use outside of Jalen Polk. They don't really have a guy like that, but Polk is the one I've been hammering the most because he was the highest drafted, highest investment guy. Moving into the AFC South here, we have the Texans. We know the characters, but what are the roles? That's my take on them because I know the running back rotation. It's going to be mixing pretty much with Dameon Pierce as the handcuff. CJ Stroud, Dalton Schultz going to be the starting tight end. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell is where the intrigue comes from. I know what to expect, generally speaking. I think Nico will be efficient, probably not lead the team in targets, but will be the most productive for fantasy because he's the big play guy, the red zone guy. Stephon Diggs, if he's the Stephon Diggs of old, could really surprise some people and have a bounce-back season. But to me, I just think he's a target-commanding PPR, move the chains kind of guy. And then I think Tank Dell is the wild card in all of this because it wouldn't shock me, given how good Tank Dell was when he was on the field last year, if he does lead this team in receiving, if he does lead this team in targets. So what are the roles of this team? Like, is it outside wide receivers, Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, and then Tank Dell's only on the field as a slot receiver, or do they move these guys around, get them involved? And I tend to think that these guys are all going to cannibalize each other, but we'll have to wait and see. Jacksonville Jaguars, can Brian Thomas get on the field right away? Because I know the running back rotation. I love Trevor Lawrence to bounce back this year. Christian Kirk is Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram is Evan Ingram. They're going to be steady Eddie PPR guys for people. But Brian Thomas Jr. tearing up training camp, being a number 2 receiver or starting outside wide receiver week 1 would be massive for his fantasy value as well as the fantasy value of Trevor Lawrence, because I think what's going to happen is that Gabe Davis is going to start on the outside ahead of Brian Thomas early on in the season. But if that doesn't happen because they paid Davis a lot of money, that would be really telling to how Brian Thomas Jr. looks in training camp and in the preseason. So he is an interesting piece for his own fantasy value as well as kind of the skeleton key to unlock this whole offense, because if he is a dominant field stretcher, he's going to make Kirk's job easier, ETN's job easier, Evan Ingram's job easier, and most importantly, Trevor Lawrence's job easier. So I really would love to see how Brian Thomas progresses throughout this training camp cycle. Next, we get into the Indianapolis Colts. The wide receiver core is kind of intriguing, but I think it's just going to be Pittman on the outside. A.D. Mitchell / Alec Pierce, whoever wins out the second outside wide receiver job early on in camp, and then Josh Downs is going to play the slot. I don't think it's overly intriguing, but A.D. Mitchell, similar to Brian Thomas Jr., if he can beat out the veteran in front of him on the outside, he's going to be a pretty intriguing dart throw sleeper to go after as well. The Tennessee Titans are also an interesting team, mainly because of their backfield, because I feel pretty confident in the take that like Levis is going to throw the ball more this year. It's going to be some combination of Ridley and Hopkins as the 1A, 1B. I tend to think it's going to be like really, really split between those two guys, and I'll just take the cheaper option in Hopkins, but maybe Ridley is the clear alpha there. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears were both good pass catchers at one point. Pollard had a down season last year. Spears is the upside young second-year running back. I have been taking a lot more Spears than I have of Pollard because he's the cheaper option, and I also feel like he could just be better than Tony Pollard at this point in his career, but that backfield is going to be something to follow. Is it like a Cardinals situation where it's clearly Tony Pollard's job, or is it going to be a 50-50 split? If it's anywhere close to a 50-50 split, I will be taking Tajay Spears and not thinking twice because I think he's the better back at this point in time. Final division of this video, we're going to move to the Kansas City Chiefs. Wide receiver is the position we're concerned with. We know Kelsey. We know the backfield. We know Mahomes. Is Rashee Rice suspended? That's going to be the first piece of information that we need to know, because if he's not, and if it's going to get punted to 2025, then I feel very confident that Rashee Rice is undervalued right now. Hollywood Brown is very exciting because he, as I talked about with Ryan Heath, he's a big-time positive regression candidate because of how bad his quarterback downfield passing has been, and we know that Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes can throw the ball downfield. And then Xavier Worthy, the young breakout star potential rookie coming into this situation, is he left for dead early on in the season? Is it Marquise and Rashee Rice and Kelsey that do all the eating early on in the year? Or does Xavier Worthy come out guns a-blazing, making big plays like Tyreek Hill was as a rookie and as a young player? So Kansas City, obviously an interesting team to follow. Moving into the Chargers, lots of storylines to follow here as well, because we don't know anything about the wide receiver or the running back position in this core right now. I think conventional wisdom would say that Gus Edwards is going to start at running back. Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, and maybe Quentin Johnston, maybe DJ Chark are going to be the three wide receiver set. As of right now, the ones I've been targeting in this offense have been McConkey and Palmer because I feel like their wide receiver positions are locked down the most. I haven't really been taking QJ, haven't really been taking Chark because I don't feel confident one way or another that either of those guys are going to be starters. And then same goes for Brendan Rice, who was a 7th round pick, Jerry Rice's son. They could all factor in. So for me, it's Palmer and McConkey that I've been taking. And then at running back, Gus Edwards, probably projects as the starter, but I've seen J.K. Dobbins beat him out before. So that's why I've been loading up on J.K. Dobbins. We haven't heard a peep about Kamani Vidal, even though everybody's fantasy analyst says that he's their favorite sleeper this year. Nobody's mentioned Kamani Vidal as a Chargers beat reporter or somebody who covers the team. It seems to be all Gus Edwards so far in the race to be the starting running back here. J.K. Dobbins' health is something that's going to be very crucial for this. If he is healthy, he is going to be, like, I already have him as my highest rostered running back from this team, but if he's not healthy, I'm really going to cool off on that exposure and start shifting more towards Gus Edwards and Vidal. I think all three of these guys at running back are good values. Whatever guy you like, go ahead and take them. If you love Gus Edwards, he's a great value. If you love J.K. Dobbins, he's a great value. If you love Kamani Vidal, he's a great value. All of them are pretty solid options. Then we get to the Denver Broncos. Backfield is a big-time source of intrigue right now. We got reports yesterday that Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine might be fighting out for a roster spot, which would basically mean that Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin would be the top two running backs on the team. But I tend to think that Javonte's job is safe. I think he's probably going to make the team, but who knows? Maybe he gets cut. Maybe he gets traded to the Cowboys or something like that. That would be really an interesting wrinkle in this backfield. Regardless, I've been taking a shit ton of Audric Estime because I think he is the best value at running back, bar none, in all of fantasy football right now. So Estime is the guy that I've been loading up on, but we'll have to see what happens in this backfield. And then behind Courtland Sutton, too, what happens at wide receiver? Is it Marvin Mims? Is it Troy Franklin? Is it Josh Reynolds on the outside? I think it's going to be Franklin by the time camp is over. He's already got a connection with the quarterback, and I think Nix will end up starting week 1. We don't have confirmation on that, but that's also something to follow. And if Franklin is out there with the college quarterback he played with for years, he's probably going to win out an early wide receiver job. And he's the type of guy I love investing in because he was a great prospect who went later in the draft than he should have. And then final team is the Las Vegas Raiders. The only player on this team I'm actively targeting is Brock Bowers, so he's really the only one I'm concerned with in terms of what happens in training camp with him. Is he the starting tight end right away? Are him and Michael Mayer splitting? How does he look as a blocker? Because we also heard some kind of rumors that he wasn't going to look great there. And then running back roles, I mean, I feel pretty good that Zamir White's going to be the lead ball carrier, and Madison/Dylan Laube are going to factor in on third down. But yeah, the Raiders are an interesting team. I don't think they're going to be a particularly good team, and I already kind of know what to expect with Devontae Adams. But Brock Bowers is the one guy that I'm very, very much intrigued by. So that was every training camp storyline. I know this was kind of like a spitball-y, off-the-cuff type of video, but if you did enjoy, if you got some value from it, leave a like down below. What is your favorite training camp storyline, training camp battle to follow this offseason? We are basically 2 days away from every team being in full rookies and veterans reported training camp. We're going to get news flying fast and furious. Like I said, if you want to keep up with all of the fantasy news, follow us over on TikTok. Check out the draft guide. All of the news blurbs that I make fantasy news of the day TikToks for will be tracked in the draft guide. So once we get to the start of the season, it's September 1st, and you guys got your fantasy drafts, and we notice on the Los Angeles Chargers news blurb section that 9 of the 10 backfield reports have been that Gus Edwards is the starter, then we're going to have to admit that Gus Edwards is the starter. That kind of thing. That's why I'm doing this year. That will be a part of the draft guide, like I said. And if you want the draft guide, you can get it one of 2 ways. First way, go down to the link in the description, sign up on Underdog using just $10. Using promo code FSE, you'll get it totally for free. So free way to get the draft guide right there. Number 2 way, you already have an Underdog account, can't play Underdog where you live. You can get it over on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSE over there as well for 30% off, 7 days for free, 6 months for free when you sign up annually. So if you want the draft guide, it will be linked down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.